This is Actualize Freedom, straight talk on growing clicks and conversions on Amazon FBA from people doing it every day. Now here's your host, digital marketing acrobat, Danny Kenji Carlson.
What's up, guys? Danny Carlson here with the Actualize Freedom podcast, and we have a really interesting episode for you here. This is going to be all about wholesale. I know a lot of you guys are into private label, but we have Dan Meadors here to tell us why wholesale is also a really interesting business model and why it might make sense to consider using wholesale as well as private label. You don't have to choose one over the other. It can be really complementary to an overall Amazon strategy. So welcome to the podcast, Dan. I like your name, by the way.
Hey, you got a great name too, my friend. Glad to be on here.
Excellent. Looking all professional with the crazy professional background and everything. So let's start out with your story. I haven't heard this story, but you mentioned really quickly to me, it was intriguing that you were abruptly forced to start this business here, which I always love stories like this. So let's just dive into that first.
Sure, man. So in 2011, one of my really good friends at the company we worked for was telling me about selling on Amazon, and I'd never sold anything on Amazon, and honestly had no idea that it was a marketplace. Like, I didn't know that third-party sellers could even sell there. In college, I had an eBay store, but honestly, I hated it. Like, even though it was pretty successful, I sold video games, particularly vintage video games, and but the problem is like, whenever you get a ton of orders, you have to ship a ton of orders, you have to pack, you have to do all those things. And it was just so tedious and awful that I was like, that sounds, no, man, I'm good. And it was like probably about, maybe 3 or 4 months after that he came in and gave his notice. And we live in Kentucky. There's just not a lot going on. So, this guy had a 6-figure plus salary, and, in our area, honestly, there's just not, those jobs aren't available. So I asked him, I was like, hey man, what are you going to do? And he said, no, I'm just making way more money on Amazon right now, and I'd rather just do that full time. And that's kind of like really, really opened our eyes. And he said he would show us what he was doing. And at the time he was using a model called retail arbitrage, where that's where you walk into a store, you buy things off of a shelf, and then you sell them for a higher price online. And it was completely mind blowing. But like, the first item I look at that he said, like, hey, this is a really good one. And, it's $2.87 in the store, and it was $16 on Amazon. And I was like, there's just no way that people pay $16 for this. And he was like, yeah, man, I promise. Like, it's crazy. So we bought, me and one of my other buddies, Eric, we just bought all of them because, what it is, like $30 or $40. And, opened our Amazon account that night, sent them in, and lo and behold, they all sold, and we were just flabbergasted. And that kind of started us down the path of wanting to just learn more about the model and do it religiously. So like, when we would get off work, we would go out and we would shop. On the weekends, we would go out and shop and just ship everything back in. And it's like, it's kind of funny because we were sitting there picking stickers off stuff and all that, and was just so happy that it was working. Like, even though we both had pretty good jobs, and we definitely we weren't making the same amount of money from Amazon that we were from our jobs. Like, it was still more rewarding, like, because it was money that we were just generating. And so it was kind of like fast forward from July to December. In December, we ended up doing $50,000 in sales. And also in December, it was pretty awkward that like 3 days before Christmas, my boss came and told me he was going to be letting me go. And it was like that immediately terrified feeling. Like, I had a brand new baby girl. It's crazy because even though I had a great job, like, I didn't have a lot of money in the bank. We had replaced the roof on our house. We had, I'd paid off my wife's student loans and all these things. So like, I had maybe $3,000 or $4,000 in the bank at the time when I lost my job. And I remember going to my I had this little downtown office, so we wouldn't have to take all the crap back to our house to ship it, and instead could just ship it out of there and not make my wife angry. And I went there and I cried for a while, and I tried to figure out what I was going to tell her, tell my wife. And then I decided, it's like, yeah, I'm just going to tell her I quit. Like, this is a great idea. I'm just going to tell her I quit. And cause I was super ashamed that I'd been fired. And I remember I went home and I was like, yeah, I'm super excited. The Amazon thing's going nuts right now. And yeah, I gave I just quit today. And she was like, you should definitely not do that. You should go get your job back right now. And I obviously couldn't. So, so we just kept moving forward with Amazon. And that first year we did about $860,000 in sales, literally working ourselves to death. I mean, on the road everywhere, driving around buying stuff. And, it's pretty liberating. Like our margins were really good. We probably did 250 in profit. We paid ourselves pretty minimally, but, and it pumped a lot back into the company. And then the second year we decided we were just going to like go all out, and just shop all the time. And we were, obviously our goal was to grow enough capital to be able to kind of get ourselves off the road, jettison into another model. But even though like we put in all this extra effort, we only made an extra $80,000. And
the second year that you did it, it was an extra $80,000 for the whole year.
Yeah, and I mean we were working like 70-hour weeks, so it was just awful. And it was like that was the point where we started deciding we were going to experiment. It was the Thanksgiving. I was at Thanksgiving dinner, getting ready to leave to go shopping, and my little girls were like, I'm sitting there looking, and it's just, gosh, like it's the biggest shopping day of the year. We have to go out. And like the year before when we went out, we're like super excited and pumped up. And that time, like, because, we had been, it had been all year long that we had been going through kind of this thing. And, the whole time, all we did was talk about how we'd just rather be home with our families and hanging out with our kids and stuff like that. And, so when we got back, we decided we were going to like try some other stuff. The first thing we tried was a retail store, which is a terrible idea. And that ultimately failed and we sold it. We created a website that sold My Little Pony collectibles. And that actually didn't do too bad.
What was the name of the website? I'm too curious. There's got to be an awesome name you came up with.
TheMLPsource.com. And it's still alive. Like we actually sold it to another guy, and he still operates it. So it wasn't a complete bust. Like we didn't make any real money, but but our goal was like I don't want to be on the road shopping 70 hours a week. I want to be able to have things coming to me. I want to be able to actually own a business, not just have a job for myself. And so that's whenever we decided to start experimenting with private label. We had our very, very first product was incredibly successful, and we probably made about $200,000 or $225,000 in profit in that first like 3 or 4 month stretch with private label. And then eventually, when we started trying to grow it and replicate that, we just couldn't do it. Like it just felt like it was like one of those one-off things. We made 3 or 4 other products, lost money, and kind of just lost confidence. And it wasn't lost confidence in the model. Like I knew private label was an amazing model for the people that knew how to do it, but it shook our confidence and our ability to be able to do the model. And so we were at that point we were pretty dejected. I mean, we'd failed at several different models. It looked like the only way we were going to make money was continue to work ourselves to death. And that's kind of when we found Wholesale. And it started out rocky for us. Like we really didn't know what we were doing there either. And we I think we took all the traditional routes. Like we went to Google and was like, how would one go about wholesale? And like everything we found pointed us in the direction of distributors and like your liquidators and stuff like that. We went and tried, and we would get these gigantic catalogs of crap back and just go through and find nothing, and hours and hours on end looking through these things and finding nothing that you could make money with. And I remember I looked over at my business partner Eric one day, and I was like, this is beyond annoying. Like we had went to ASD, we just lost a bunch of money there because we bought products that by the time we got home, they were just worthless. And so like I was like, I just want to carry this one single product, like this product. And it's like, I don't know which distributor or who I have to contact to be able to carry this. And Eric was like, well, maybe we should just call the manufacturer, call the company who owns it and ask them where to buy it. So, that was obviously the answer, right? Like all along, that was the answer is you just talk to people and you can probably find better ways to source products. But
instead of Google and all these marketplaces that everyone has access to, right? You literally call the people direct to the source.
Exactly, and it seems incredibly simple, but everything we had read pointed us in the other direction. And so I called this very first brand, and I told them that I'd like to carry their products and asked where I would buy it, and they were like, "Well, we sell direct, man. Like we'd be happy to set you up an account and get an order." And I was like, "Wow, it's almost too easy. How much is that order?" And they said that the minimum opening order was $250. So we ended up placing an order. It went really successfully, and that was the thing that like kickstarted the growth of our company, because it gave us at least a direction to point in. So we did that over the next few months, just reaching out to brands, and then like we encountered this new hurdle that just kept happening. Like every time we would contact somebody, they would tell us that they didn't want to work with us, that they already had enough Amazon sellers, they weren't looking for more, and that was incredibly frustrating, because all these are the products that look like what they would be able to make money, and it's like, why doesn't anybody want to work with me? I'd love to carry these products, and that's kind of like that self-realization thing, right? Is like I don't know what caused me to think about it, but I'm just doing everything. I'm doing the same thing everybody else is. I'm not bringing anything extra. I'm not helping them in any fashion. Like the fact of the matter is that these companies have people lining up to pay them. Like the fact that I'm willing to pay them isn't a service to them. It's a service to me if they work with me. And once I had that kind of like realization that the way to, to start working with people would be to add some level of value, that the game really changed for us. I remember I called this one brand, and this was like really soon after that. And it was a really good product, and I'd emailed them, and their email was like, "Hey man, we're not interested in any other Amazon sellers." And I was like, you know what, I'm going to call this guy, because it was actually a product that I used at the time too, and and did like it. So I got I got him on the phone, and it's funny because I still remember his name is Bob. This conversation was four years ago or something, and so I was like, hey Bob, I'd sent you guys an email about carrying your products, and you told me you guys weren't looking for any other Amazon sellers. And he was like, and I meant it. And I was like, wow, because you're just wanting to have a conversation. The guy like meets it with fire. And I was like, no, I definitely understand. And, but I'd love to talk to you about your Amazon presence a little bit, if you got a few minutes. And he was like, yeah, sure. So I got him to go to his page, and we're sitting here going through his page, and I was like, why do you feel like you don't need any other Amazon sellers? And he was like, I have E-Tails working with me. I have River Colony Trading and some other monster that does like over $100 million a year. And he was like, so I have the best Amazon sellers. And I was like, cool, man. No, I definitely appreciate that. Those guys are amazing. So when we get to his page and we see his listing, he has one picture, he has a subpar title, he has bullets, and he didn't know this. Like, to him, his listing was normal. Like, it was just, that's what an Amazon listing looks like. And I was like, do you care to open up another page, man? And I'll take you over and show you your competitor's listing. And, I knew who the competitor was because I actually used the product. And I get him over there, and he sees that their listing looks great. It's, full title, full set of pictures, great bullet points that talk about the product, description, and all the things that make a product sell on Amazon. And I was like, all right, so your product is better than theirs, and I know your product's better than theirs. And I was like, but if you were just your average consumer, which one would you buy? And he was like, I would buy the competitor's product, not close. And I was like, exactly. I was like, so you realize that you guys are losing a ton of business by not fixing this, right? And while you have the best Amazon sellers in the world working for you, they're not taking the time to do it. These problems still exist. And that was like, I talked to him and I was just like, man, you know what? Whenever you work with those guys, you're just another account. You're one of 1,000 people they work with, and some rep, that you're some rep's responsibility. With us, like if you decide to work with me, like I don't have a big giant team. It's me and my business partner, but this is my cell phone number, and I promise you, you're never going to have to wonder if these things are going to be fixed again. Like that's the difference. It's like you can take this information to those sellers right now, and I'm sure they have somebody on staff that can probably get it fixed in 15 or 20 minutes. But they didn't do it, and they didn't do it proactively. Like, do you want to be in the position that every time you need something done that you have to know it so you can ask them to do it? Or do you just want to have some guy that wants to get it done because you're the most important client that he has? And he was like, no, I would love to work with you, man. And that was it was like after that conversation, it was kind of crazy because I felt like I performed well above my capabilities at the time. Like I didn't know what I was doing to add value specifically. I didn't, my sales, like as far as being a sales pitch, it was actually terrible, but I did one thing. I actually helped the guy understand his problem. And by doing that, it made him want to work with us. So that was our leverage over the next year, is like we would contact brands and we would just try to do our best to provide tons of value and actually help them rather than just place an order. And in that year,
I love that strategy there, because you're coming in there, you're just providing a whole bunch of value regardless of whether or not they want to work with you, right? You're not being like, hey, like we can potentially provide you a lot of value if you want to work with us. You're going in there and you're telling them exactly all of the things that they're doing wrong, and that's value they could potentially just do themselves. But because you're the person who brings them that knowledge and that value, you're now by default the only person who has the real solutions to the problems you just brought up. Right?
Exactly. Yeah,
it's actually a really genius strategy.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you're the most knowledgeable person they know on the subject, whether you are or not. Yeah, I mean, you're the person that took the step to actually bring them the information. But in that year, that was the year, like, we really did double down and just start contacting brands, utilizing that strategy. And our business went from 1.2 million to 3.6 million that year. Just by doing that, just by contacting brands, and providing value. Ultimately, and another thing had happened, right? Like now that we have moved to wholesale, we have products starting to come to us. Like our workload had started dropping. Like, so instead of working, 70, 80 hour weeks, like I'm down to the, I'll call it the 30 to 50 hour weeks, more towards the 50, like, the typical entrepreneur stuff. And so it was getting better, but it wasn't there yet. And that was where we made another big jump. And it was focusing on SOPs and processes. Like we started building SOPs into our business. We started building processes into our business and leveraging those to train employees. Like we hired, it was funny. We hired our first 2 employees and we couldn't even really afford them at the time, but we knew that they would be able to create the bandwidth for us to grow. So we stretched ourselves thin. We hired the employees. We indoctrinated them into the processes and immediately started getting results. And the other thing that happened is as we were getting those results, our hours were declining. Like our employees were able to take over a lot of the things that we were doing. We were slowly firing ourselves from every position in our business.
What were the roles for those first 2 employees?
We actually had one guy who, at the time, we still had our inside like a internal warehouse, which we don't have anymore. We utilize a third-party prep center now. But we had one guy that was packing and shipping orders, and one guy who was researching brands and contacting the brand owners. So, and those were the jobs at the time that we were primarily doing. So it was like, I was on the phone less with vendors, but I was still doing it. I was like in there coaching and listening to his calls, talking to him about it, and making him or helping him get better. But ultimately, a lot of those jobs were just starting to be done outside of us. And over the next couple of years, by building processes into our business, we were ultimately able to, at this point, like if you look now, I actually don't have a day-to-day responsibility in our Amazon business. Like, me and my other partner were gone for 2 weeks earlier this year. Had no hiccups. Never even had a call from our employees or anything like that. Like it's literally no day-to-day responsibilities. But it's something that I don't think we could have accomplished if we didn't do the footwork of putting in processes and things like that.
What's up, Freedom Actualizers? So I'm recording this after this podcast episode has already ended, but this information was so valuable from Dan that I have got him to agree to create a webinar just for you guys that goes deeper into his strategies when it comes to Amazon wholesale. So he goes into a lot of the stuff that he's mentioning here, a lot of the strategies, but actually step by step, what are his processes and his frameworks for going through the strategies. So if you guys want to sign up for that, then go to go.kenjiroi.com/wholesale. So that's go.kenjiroi.com/wholesale, and you guys can register for the webinar there. It's going to be a good one. Dan is a killer. And so I want to ask you, where did you find the information or the resources needed to create those systems and the processes? Like, one resource I've mentioned to the audience before is a book called Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz that just really walks through, how to systematize your business with the end goal of really being able to step away from your business for an entire month and not even answer one single email and have everything still work properly. So I'm wondering, where did you learn how to systematize your business?
It was actually at a conference. We went to one of the Amazon conferences, and one of the speakers there had recently sold his business, and he talked about the most valuable thing in his business at the time were the standard operating procedures, and ultimately that was what helped him escape the his day-to-day role in it. And after he had spoke, I actually just went up and talked to him and got more information on standard operating procedures and things like that. But it was kind of funny. The real way that we did it was what I would think is pretty effective. So once we understood what a standard operating procedure was what it was for, the way we started going about it is, at the time, we were doing all these jobs in our business. So before I would do a process, I would just think about and write down, the steps I would take to do the process, and then I would run through it a couple of times to make sure that was exactly how I wanted it. And then I would record a short video of me doing it, explaining the process, have my employees rewrite the process, do it. And if it worked and achieve the result that we were looking for, that became the process in the business. So it was like the fastest way for us to make processes was to just do it and record ourselves and then forward it on to the employees and let them do it.
I love that. Yeah, you're actually getting your employees to rewrite the process and really flesh it out, right? So like, if you're just creating a little screen capture video of you doing it the first time, then your employee can watch that video, use it to learn the process, and then actually write it out, maybe add a little bit more detail themselves, right? Rather than you spending a million years just making this perfect document that's got all these screenshots and all the steps all fleshed out and laid out, right?
Right. And then the easy part is, once they've done that, once they've walked through that process, right? Like you go back, you see what the results were, you see if they did everything correctly. And if it works, you never have to do it again. That's a process that you now have. So we did that through every aspect of our business. Is the first thing we did is really focused on segmentation. For us, we realized that departments are almost individually contained, right? Like you in most instances that you own a business, you're not going to have somebody that does A to Z, all the tasks A to Z. Like if you want to create a more effective business, you have to have it segmentized to where people are working on something similar on a daily basis. That not only lets them, from our perspective, it not only lets them learn the process better, but it lets them become almost an expert of their field if you've got dedicated employees. So the first thing we did is that we focused on segmentation and broke down the different components of the business that had to occur for us to make money and continue operating. And for us, that was scouting, then sourcing, and then selling. Like, and when I say selling, that's obvious. It's like, yeah, you sell your items, but for us, it was the components that take part after the sale, particularly like viewing stock levels, reordering, and things like that to continue the sales cycle. So once we had segmented part of our business, like it was just go through and, what are all the steps related to properly scouting a product, and we would detail those and create the SOPs.
Yeah. And so at this point, this is kind of where you are now, where you have a business where you don't technically have to operate the business at all, right? And you can just focus on strategies for growth and improving systems and maybe hiring more key employees or something like that. Like, so what does the day-to-day of Dan Meadors look like in your current wholesale business?
Like I said, I don't have any day-to-day roles as far as like obligations, but it's the vast majority of it's just coaching, and that's like our employees are, they independently are able to analyze products, make purchases without like we don't require us to sign off or anything like that. Like that's the beauty of our system is everything is pretty paint by numbers, right? Like they're not having to make individual decisions that are subjective. Like whenever we're scouting products, like our products, if they meet these criteria, it's a product that we want to carry, and they either meet it or they don't. It's really black and white. So whenever you remove all the subjectivity out of your business, it makes their jobs really, really simple. And whenever there's the corner case scenarios, that's kind of where I come in. Or if it's, if they're focusing on trying to develop a better relation here and they want strategic advice, like, here's kind of the situation we're working with. What should I do from here? And that's my role in the business, is to advise them in those instances. But as far as like your standard nuts and bolts operation, like nothing.
That's a beautiful thing. And for people listening who they sell a private label and, they're making some money doing that, and maybe they're doing pretty well, and they've heard about wholesale, tell them what they would need really to get started. Is there a certain money amount, a certain amount of time they should be dedicating to this? Just give us a little rundown for someone like that.
Sure. No, I mean, private label is that there's a beautiful thing about private label sellers, and it is that they're by far the most skilled sellers on Amazon, right? They have to be by nature, and that's, they have to bring a product to market, they have to introduce traffic, they have to make that product ultimately sell when it had no following before. So that in and of itself takes more skill than finding a product that's already selling, and just tapping into the existing traffic or existing fan base. So that's the first thing you have to realize is as a private label seller, your skills are coveted. But with wholesale, it's just such an easy thing to mix in. Like we have very similar scouting methods to the ways that we find product to private label. And like, here's the thing is like, you guys are going through all of these products and you're determining, you're looking for your gap and that's it. But all the products that you're passing through to get there are all wholesale opportunities. Now, for us, the difference is like the logistics behind private label is pretty complicated. Like you have to do, you go overseas, you order your product, you have to have it boated over or air freighted over, and it's just a longer process. For us, whenever we find a product that's a good candidate for us, we contact the brand, set up the account, and generally have the product in our account within a week. And then reorders are also that simple because like everything we handle is domestic. We're just representing domestic brands. So whenever you think about the brands that we're contacting and the strategies I was talking about earlier, where, adding value is a critical component. Like that's the differentiator in being successful in our model, and not as just being able to help brands or take the time to educate them at least. Now, private label sellers do that better than anybody else, so they tend to convert the best because they're able to offer a lot of those skills that the brands are looking for. So I think, as far as private label, I think there's a lot of overlap, and I think a lot of those sellers are just inherently good at the model that we do because of the skills they've developed to become good private label sellers. So I think it can be just a really good cash flow boon to their existing business and kind of fill gaps in their potential product lines if they're trying to move away from Amazon as well. Because I know that's a lot of things, right? It's like once you're a successful private label seller and you're starting to generate money, what's the first thing you want to do? And it's develop your audience outside, right? Like develop that mailing list and all the cool components that go with it. Wholesale provides a way to fill a store up with profitable products that you can also be selling on Amazon too, without really taxing any of your any of your bandwidth, because like everything we do is systemized. So, this is like, who scouts our products? It's a virtual assistant. Like, we have virtual assistants that find products for us, and then we reach out to the brands and establish those. With that, like, it's just something that easily integrates into the private label system, I feel like.
Yeah, I like what you said there about filling in the gaps. You mentioned that when you're doing your product research, you're probably going over a bunch of products that would be really good for wholesale as well. So if you're a private label seller and you already have yourself or a bunch of team members spending quite a bit of time on product research, why not just make a better use of that product research time and get some wholesale products going on, right?
Right, it's really good cash. Like that, it's really good for your cash flow. That's the other point. Is typically, if you look at a private labeler's model, they have those big dips, and that's where they're having to place their orders, and they have the gap before the product lands. Well, wholesale has a much smaller gap, so it's really good at feeding your cash flow in those dead periods as well.
Yeah, and so let's get a bit of an overview of kind of how the model works. Like, typically, what kind of profit margins are you looking for in a good wholesale product? What are the minimum orders going to be like?
Sure.
Just so people can get an idea of if this is going to work for them or not.
Sure. So like I mentioned earlier, it's $250 was that minimum order for that first account we picked up. The most common numbers that we see are $250 to $500. Like, occasionally you'll encounter the crazy one that's really high, but those are so few and far between that it's almost non-existent. So really, $250 to $500 is a pretty good expectation for what a minimum order would be. Like, to get started with wholesale, our suggestion is you probably need about $2,000 in capital to be buying products. And that's enough to place multiple minimum orders, as well as like go above and beyond a minimum order for a discount. So it's a relatively easy and cheap model to get into. The one thing you do have to have if you are a U.S. resident is you would need a resale certificate from your state, and that requires you to be a registered business. And it's like a driver's license for wholesalers, right? It's like the thing that they ask for to make sure that you're a business as opposed to just a dude trying to get discounts.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from there, it sounds like a pretty low barrier to entry. The difficult thing really is finding the right products, and then actually, that sales process of convincing these companies that they should be wholesaling to you instead of wholesaling to the other Amazon sellers, or maybe even themselves on Amazon, right? And is that something that you have a good, well-defined process for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the you'd also mentioned about profit margin, like what kind of expectations for profit margins. Like typical what we look for is we look for 30% ROI or better. But what we've noticed is, once we start working with a brand and developing our relationship, that our margins get better over time. Like, if you look at our current, in our business, our current net margins are around 24%, which is pretty strong. But it's, from that perspective, I feel like that a lot of your margin is relationship driven, so they tend to be smaller on the front end, maybe more in the 15 to 18% range, that I think is pretty achievable early. You'd asked another question about what was your next question? I remembered I'd missed the margin thing.
Yeah, just some kind of tips about creating these relationships with these suppliers.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I can give you several tips about finding products as well, like just kind of like some baseline criteria that we're looking for successful products. Like, the first criteria that we care about is that Amazon doesn't carry the product. Now, there are a couple of reasons that we care there. Is number one, Amazon's hyper competitive, right? So like, if you try to get under them, then they'll follow you down and ultimately drive the price down. The second reason is that whenever Amazon comes onto a listing, their retail team locks the listing to changes and makes it much, much harder to get changes pushed through. So like, I can't offer the value to the companies that I'm talking to. And what we've realized is, if you're not offering value, you're not doing something extra, then you're just you're an expendable piece. Like, we had built our business around just, buying and selling products initially. And what happened is we lost some key accounts, and it really, really hurt us. But how do you not lose those? And that's through relationships, and that's by providing value and them actually wanting and needing to work with you. So having Amazon on the listing prevents that. The next thing that we look for, though, is we want a lot of products that are carried by 3 or more sellers. Like, I don't want to be reaching out to private label sellers, and it's not because I don't think I can help them necessarily. It's just, whenever they created their product, they created it with the idea that they were going to be the retailer. In that instance, our interests don't align, or as a way to save time, like, we just focus on brands with 3 or more sellers. Then the last criteria, like for kind of like a simple criteria to get started, is we like products that sell more than 40 times a month. And the reason for that is, whenever we got started, we didn't have a lot of money, and we didn't have particularly a lot of skills at driving traffic. So we didn't want products where that they could just potentially sit and die. Like, I knew my limitations as a seller, so I needed products that were already selling. But ultimately what that does is it keeps it will help you run a healthy business if you focus on buying products that are already selling and have an established floor. So those are like our 3 little criteria. But as far as like advice for like people that are wanting to get started, particularly if they come from the private label background, is find products that look like they would be a good fit. And here's another big tip is, if you've heard of the brand, it's probably too big. Like, think about it from this perspective. Let's say you contact Nike and you're like, hey guys, I see a lot of deficiencies on your listings and could correct this. And I could probably raise your sales $500,000. Well, Nike doesn't care about $500,000. Like, that's not going to make a big difference to their company. But to a lot of the smaller brands, like, if you're able to contact them and establish those relationships, that you can, a $500,000 change in their Amazon sales would really register and be able to be a massive boon to their bottom line. So that's another point of focus would be to focus on small brands, and then just like as far as how to convert them, educate them. Like, tell them what they're doing wrong, tell them how you could fix it. And that's the way to start getting in the door to setting up these wholesale relationships.
I love that. And you've really laid it out for people. It's something that a lot of people, they know that it's a great model, but it can be very difficult, right? There's a lot of information out there that quite honestly is really bad. I think you mentioned some of that when you're starting out in wholesale. You're following some of that advice and it just doesn't really work. And it's unfortunate a lot of people really get turned off to it. So what you just mentioned was really, really valuable. And if people want to learn more about wholesale, I know obviously you have the wholesale formula. Where's the best place for them to learn more about what you do and potentially reach out to you if they wanted to do that?
Yeah, we have actually. I set up a page just for your guys, just for your people, man. Just go to the wholesaleformula.com/actualize freedom, and that is that's a special PDF that we created that just gives you like that 30,000 foot overview of our business model and just breaks down step by step so people can understand what we actually do. I felt like that's probably the best way is, there are so many misconceptions with the model that I think that, the people that are potentially interested may not jump on because of those misconceptions. I know that it cost me a lot of time. Like, my first thoughts about wholesale before we got started were that, you would have to take gigantic orders and for stuff like, we assumed that you would have to have $30,000 minimum orders and things like that. And it's just not the case. Like, the fact of the matter is like the vast majority of accounts you set up are $250 to $500. So it's not very hard to get started. And then, that's what the purpose of that PDF really is. It's to show people that it is something that literally anybody can do if they want to.
I love that, guys. So again, that's wholesaleformula.com/actualize freedom. Awesome. Just for you guys. Just thinking of us. Dan's thinking of us, guys. Awesome. Well, this has been super, super valuable. And if you're open to it, Dan, I'd love to get you on for a webinar at some point that maybe would be going over, how wholesale could fit into the strategy of a private label seller.
For sure, man.
If that's something you would be interested in doing, I know the audience would love something like that. So definitely would love to have you on.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be fantastic.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. Lots of good golden nuggets in this one. And guys, if you haven't already, please go leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. It better be 5 stars though, or else I'm probably going to look up your address on Google and send a glitter bomb or something like that. I'm going to do something really nasty if it's not 5 stars. So watch out for that. And the show notes are on actualizefreedom.com. And again, that was wholesaleformula.com/actualizefreedom for Dan's special little goodies for us. So thanks for listening, guys, and until next time, take care. What's up, Freedom Actualizers? So I'm recording this after this podcast episode has already ended, but this information was so valuable from Dan that I have got him to agree to create a webinar just for you guys that goes deeper into his strategies when it comes to Amazon wholesale. So he goes into a lot of the stuff that he's mentioning here, a lot of the strategies, but actually step by step, what are his processes and his frameworks for going through the strategies. So if you guys want to sign up for that, then go to go.kenjiroi.com/wholesale. So that's go.kenjiroi.com/wholesale. And you guys can register for the webinar there. It's going to be a good one. Dan is a killer.
For show notes and resources mentioned in this episode, visit kenjiroi.com.